Welcome again to another Myth Monday, and Tom's back in with us, and we are responding to some people on Facebook who said that we might want to cover something to do with stretching, and in particular stretching before exercise. No particular sport, but running would be the most obvious one. So I have my own views on that. I think Tom shares them. So Tom, what do you think?
I think I would advise that stretching and making sure you've got the range of motion required in the joint for the task you're about to undertake is important, although there isn't any evidence to suggest that stretching before, during or after exercise has any effect on injuries. So I'm always a bit perplexed when I see runners stretching their posterior delts. I always wonder what's the point in that. But I would definitely be thinking, if you're an office worker who does a lot of sitting, definitely stretching off the front of your hips would be a good idea before you go for a run, to try and reduce the risk of pulling things that have been tight all day and then you suddenly applying loads of load and stretch to them.
So specific for their daily tasks, But I think that certainly I say to people that I don't have a problem with stretching. What I have a problem with is that people can become really fixated to the point where they do it in the absence of all the other stuff they should be doing, like strength and conditioning. So if you've only got a certain amount of hours a day or a week where you're spending 3 or 4 sessions of yoga and not doing some really good quality strength training, the ratios are wrong. The ratio should be about, I'm guessing here, but 80-20. It should be 80% of your time is doing some really good quality strength stuff and some stretching, and that stretching only really needs to be done, as you say, to maintain the level of mobility in a joint you need for the task. So for running, for instance, I only tend to give ankle mobility work a little bit if they're not able to really dorsiflex, and hip stretching to open the hips up so that you can really get your stride length working and pushing through. But hamstring stretching and quad stretching and calf stretching, there is no science whatsoever to say that it does anything to prevent injuries.
Nope.
And I think the only interesting thing I've read is if you do static stretching before any sport, it reduces power in the associated muscle, because of course you want the muscle to contract and shorten and give you power, and all you're doing is lengthening it out. So when people are rolling the size of their ITB, stretching that out, which doesn't stretch anyway, and stretching other bits, there's no biological reasoning to it. There's no sense in it.
No. We need tension to hold us up. If there's no tension, we'd be, on the floor, just a mess.
But it has become this sort of almost religious thing, isn't it? That people just assume, because they've been taught it by their coach at the running club or coach of whatever sport, you've got to stretch off before you play, or stretch off even after you play, which again equally has no evidence whatsoever for. So, but people get stuck in a rut, and they'll listen to this, probably think it's quite entertaining maybe or something, but they go, yeah, but that's not really true, right? They'll just think that. They go, that's not really true, it's just 2 guys in a room saying it's true. But if you Google the evidence, which is not hard, you'll see that we're not far off the truth, actually.
No. And if you go and watch a Premiership football game, because the Premier League is probably at the cutting edge of sports science, go and watch their warm-up on the pitch. They're not doing any stretching. It's all plyometric, dynamic stuff, things like that. Whereas, up to a few years ago, you'd still see the cricketers doing their static stretches on the pitch because they were behind in the sports science knowledge. Even and rugby as well is catching up now, definitely.
Yeah. I think the other thing about it, about the recreational sports person, is that stretching, quite frankly, versus strengthening, which has got way more data for injury prevention and increasing performance, stretching is, quite frankly, a load easier than going to a gym or lifting weights.
Less effort.
It's less effort, which
you do it drunk.
Which I think is probably the reason why some people veer towards a Pilates yoga approach, because it's quite frankly easier than being really strenuous in the gym with your strengthening. But that's hopefully a take-home message, is that apply loads more of your time to strengthening and much less to stretching. Thanks.